Hey,
Hey,
Casey.
lady.
How's it going?
Good. How's
I
your
like those-
deal going? The one that we were talking about this weekend?
I got it under contract.
I know.
We'll see.
How long's your option?
21 days.
Okay.
Because we're looking at putting 30 homes on the land. It's different than just like a ranch. So a lot
21
of due
days, man.
diligence. I'm totally freaking out, but it'll be exciting.
Super exciting.
How's everybody doing this morning? We've got a lot of folks signing on. Hey, Rika, how are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Congratulations on your contract. That's a big deal.
Yeah, thank you. I might need to talk to you about that later today.
Yeah, that's exactly in my wheelhouse. Actually, we've got several clients that like to do neighborhoods or trying to do smaller neighborhoods right now. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. They're actually planning to do it more as like a friends and family compound. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
we've seen those too. We've got a couple clients that are doing that exact thing right now.
Yeah. So
Good.
yeah. But we'll probably give it a minute or two just to let a few more folks sign on. We've got people coming, I know.
Sure. I'm not sure if you guys normally introduce, like if the realtors could introduce themselves to me, that way that I know what their specialization is and what they're more curious about or what they want to know more about. Because I want them to feel comfortable interrupting me throughout the whole presentation, because that's how I can, more cater to what they want and what questions they have. But anyway,
Yeah,
I'll say that a couple more times.
absolutely. Well, why don't we go down the list? Casey, you start.
Okay, I'll start. My name is Casey Gillum. I do everything, Georgetown down to Kyle. My main interest right now is that I have a fourplex coming over by UT that has students in it, and my client is wanting to sell it. And he wants to market it based, not only that it's an investment with UT students in it, but he feels that there is a lot of potential just with the lot and where it's located in proximity to downtown.
Awesome.
Cool. Ashley, how about you?
Hi there, Ashley Vavasser. I'm kind of all over the place, but mostly concentrate in Southwest Austin, Dripping Springs, and Lakeway. Mostly buyer's agent, but I have some listings coming up. And yeah, I'm just very interested in learning more about what you guys have to offer today.
Cool. Bailey, you're up.
Pretty much the same as Ashley. I work all over, but I try to focus Southwest. I live in Dripping Springs. I mostly represent sellers, but I have, a pretty good buyer pool, and a lot of them are central. So deal with a lot of those crazy lots in Central Austin. It'll be helpful for me to understand what we're looking at.
Cool. Drew, what about you? Quick overview. Maybe. He doesn't have his video on, so I'm not sure.
Hi there. Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. I'm Drew Parker. I'm a buyer's agent, and I typically work downtown East Austin, and just looking to hear and learn more about what you guys offer.
Awesome.
Cool. Hey, Eric Engberg, how about you next? Are you on mute, Eric? Well, maybe he's not right at the computer right now. What about Linda? Okay, maybe not. Philip, how about you?
Hello, I'm Philip Myers. Kind of same thing. I'm all over the place, Georgetown down to San Marcos. I'm buyer kind of heavy a little bit, but I seem to get the unique listings at times. I do have a potential lot that would be coming up in 78704. It's got a 800 square foot house on it. It's about 8,000 square feet on the lot size, SF3, but there's several large oak trees on it. So we're trying to determine what the best way to market the property is once we decide to go to market.
Well, Tara, how about you? Just doing quick intros.
Hi, Tara Mcguire.
I primarily work with sellers, and from what I think this session is going to be about, it'll be very helpful. I run into, I'd say probably 5 or so situations a year that I could use this. I actually had one last week, but I decided to pass the buck and have it be buyer beware and figure it out themselves. But it would be nice to be able to help them out. So anyway, excited for the information. Thank you for having this.
Cool. Let's see, who am I missing? Tyson, you want to say hi?
Yes, I'm here. Tyson Hombrook. I mostly work with buyers, work pretty much all over, but for the most part, it's North Austin suburbs. And yeah, so I don't do too many lots. I don't run into this stuff too much, but I want to be ready for when it does.
Cool. Let's see. I think we're getting close to having everybody. Morgan. Hey, Morgan, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Morgan. I got into this meeting a little bit later because I had to switch to my laptop because I had some problems with the audio. So what was the actual question?
We're just saying kind of like what you generally work and just a general introduction.
I got you. My name is Morgan Motley. Been doing real estate for 7-8 years, all over Austin. I mean, I've done deals all the way from Killeen to San Marcos and everything in between. And I do probably about, I don't know, 70-30, probably buyers to seller ratios, but you know, always have clients buying lots, wanting to build houses on it and stuff like that. So just looking to get a little bit more info.
I think Craig joined us.
Hello, good morning. Yes, my name is Craig Mcguire, particular buyer's agent. I do have some listings. I do run into some larger parcel properties for clients, mainly investors, kind of on the outside, so on restrictions and wanting to know what they can and can't do. So yeah, looking forward to hearing some of this information and utilizing you all as a resource.
Sweet. I think, let's see, Vivia, you're here too. Give us a quick intro.
Hi, I'm Vivia Robertson. I help buyers and sellers, but mainly buyers. I get all over Austin and the surrounding areas. Yes, I've worked with y'all a little bit because we had a recommendation to use you and we just bought an investment property ourselves and we're curious about the lot and what we could do with it. And we're almost thinking about backing out, but based off the information you all gave us, we stuck with it. So
Great.
Very cool. Very cool. Jeremy, you joined us. We're just doing real quick intros and where you generally like to work and who you work with.
Amazing. Actually, can you, well, yeah, I'll go ahead. I can't get on video right now, but I'm Jeremy. Let's see, repeat the, repeat the prompt.
What you'd like to generally work in real estate. What do you normally do? Rika's trying to understand, you know, kind of who we are and what we do.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, generally I'm working with a lot of newer first-time home buyers, second-time home buyers who are maybe looking to make an investment. I do have a small little, you know, group of people who like to try to house hack and stuff like that. So this is very useful in terms of, you know, how we can use you know, the properties that we're looking at, if we can use them for certain reasons. So yeah, that's it.
Very cool. Simon, I saw that you just joined. We're doing quick intros. You want to say hey?
Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, I've never used Zoom from this computer before. My name's Simon. I've been with Grambling about a year. A little over a year at this point, and I've been a realtor about 5 years. Like hanging out with my dogs, driving stick shift car. I don't know, is that what?
Where do you normally like to work and what kind of clients do you normally work with?
Okay, so I try to stay North Austin, Round Rock, Pflugerville, Cedar Park, those areas. And then my favorite are first-time home buyers because I like to see the excitement on their faces when you help them into a contract and then ultimately purchase the house.
Cool. Delane, I saw that you logged in. You want to say hey to everybody, where you work and who you normally like to work with?
unmute myself. Hi, I am Delane Kaplan, and I have been in real estate for many, many years, but I'm new to Bramlett and licensed recently here in Austin. And I live in Cedar Park, so prefer the North Austin, Cedar Park, Leander, but we'll go within reasonable distance.
Sure.
What market were you in previous, Delane?
Virginia.
Okay. Totally different market. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's most everybody. I think there are a couple people that said they couldn't unmute, but I think that's everybody that has the ability to do so. If anybody didn't get to say hi and wants to, please go ahead and say so real fast.
Can I just edit what I said because I feel like a total goon?
Sure.
Hey, I'm Jeremy. I'm at a stoplight on my way to get my partner some coffee. Big day for her today. But we live in East Austin. I work a lot of times in North and East Austin, and I've only been in real estate for a couple of years and just joined Bramlett a few months ago.
Cool. Linda, did you maybe get unmuted?
Yes, I'm unmuted.
Yay.
I know how to unmute, so something was not working. I have been in real estate, I guess, starting as an investor for 10 years now. And I have found myself mostly working in new construction, but I do both, probably 50-50, and mostly work with buyers, but do work with some sellers, and mostly North and all the way up to Georgetown.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, Ricka, I think I'll hand it over to you. Rick is with Austin Landkeepers, and Nye, and actually Vivia, as she mentioned, had worked with them for some reports on some central Austin lots, and they came highly recommended. I think they'll be a great resource for us when we're helping clients through option periods and stuff like that. But the point of today's class is so that we can all talk about sort of the basics of land use, zoning in central Austin, what to look out for, trees, could I do an ADU, pools, that sort of stuff. So Ricka, without further ado, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you. Real quick, would you allow me to share my screen, Lauren?
Yes. Hang on one second.
We'll go ahead and get that up because there's going to be a lot of maps and a lot of information. So yes.
I think you should be good.
Yes, perfect. All right, so bear with me, guys. Give me a second here. Okay, does everybody see just the presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So good morning. I'm here to speak to you about land use and zoning, what to look for in the city of Austin and the surrounding areas. So just as a formal introduction, my name is Ricka Keepers. I am the owner and founder and land planner for Keepers Land Planning and Permitting. And I also want to introduce Kristen James, who is also on the call. She is my land reviewer. She has a bachelor's from Texas A&M as well. And her bachelor's is in architecture. So she's a code whisperer like me. She understands the code very well and helps me with the consultations that we'll be talking about today. So Kristen, you want to say hi just real quick?
Hi, everybody.
And if you don't feel comfortable interrupting me, she can interrupt me. So just feel free to, if there's no such thing as a wrong question. So if you want me to go into more specific detail about what something means, even if it's a specific term, just, let me know, just interrupt me and I'll go into further detail. So a little bit about me. I have a master's in urban planning from Texas A&M, a bachelor's in international missiology, a member of ULI, local housing council, a member of NARI for builders, and a member of CBUSA for builders as well. A lot of our clients are builders. Here we go. Okay. Now, what are our specialties? Land use expert, permit specialist, and developer. With over 10 years of experience, we are a full service permit expediting and land planning company. We are based in Austin, but we work in area all over across Texas, areas all over across Texas with landowners, realtors, and builders in both the commercial and residential development industry. Our goal is to help make your dreams come true, or make the nightmares go away. Sometimes when you find a property that has unpermitted work or things have not been permitted correctly, it can end up being a nightmare, especially in the city of Austin. So we'll talk about that. Our land planning services, consultations, and quick reports. I think Vivian mentioned a quick report. We do the in-depth research for complicated properties and help you and your clients understand what is actually possible for their property. That is one of my favorite parts about our business, because we're able to really make their dreams come true. If you've got a client and they're really worried or concerned and they need an ADU for an in-law, or whatever their goal is financially, we can help make that come true. Now, do we have to be the bearer of bad news sometimes? Yes. But sometimes we can figure out the gray areas in the code to use to the advantage of the client. Permitting services, rezone, subdivision, site plans, new construction, and more. So pretty much if it's a permit, we can get it done. We take the permitting process off of your hands and work directly with the county, city, and the various professionals working on the project, so you don't have to stress about it. Okay, so today's agenda, zoning basics, single family, multifamily, and commercial. So we are going to really focus on that. What details to look for in new properties for your clients, and case studies, crazy stuff we have seen. And I'd love to hear your perspective on those as well. So single family zones. Properties that fall into single family zones are typically meant for the use of one family at a time. About 60 to 75% of all the residential zones in a city are single family. And I want to just show the screen on the side here, the table of zoning. It shows you single family 1 through single family 6, which are all the zones in Austin. We will talk about a couple other cities as well. In Austin, there are 7 single family zones. Let's see here. Single family 2 and single family 3 are the most common zones that you will see. The next slide, we're going to go into the big differences. Other cities around Austin have similar breakdowns to single family zones, though they are sometimes labeled differently. Pflugerville, for an example, we have several clients in Pflugerville. They have SFE, single family S, and single family R. And their minimum lot sizes are a little bit different than Austin. They're going to be larger, just like a normal suburb. As the main single family district, and the type is based more on lot size than potential density, because they're not going to allow as much density as Austin would. Okay, so if you see all the red in the mapping, and I'm going to pull up a map in a minute to show the differences between the colors, but if you see all of the yellow, it basically represents all single family in Austin, and this is just a little screenshot of that. So differences between single family 2 and single family 3. So your minimum lot sizes are going to be the same. So a legal lot size in Austin is 5,750 square feet. Now, I don't know if anyone's run into situations where that's not the case, where the lot size is smaller. We deal with quite a few properties like that. And a lot of the times, well, the city has a way, another process when it's not been platted or reported properly, or if it's smaller than that legal lot size, which, I mean, there are lots that are even 1,200 square feet in Austin. And we go through what's called a land status determination when that happens. And it's a way to avoid going through the platting process, because I'm sure if anyone's gone through subdivision in Austin, you'll know it's a very long process and can take a very long time, even just for single family. So the minimum lot width is the same, 50 feet, and number of units still considering the ADUs, but number of units is 1, but then the ADUs in single family 3, you can actually have as 1,100 square feet. Or 15% of the lot size, whichever is smaller. Typically the 1,100 is going to be larger. Must meet the ADU standards. Now there is a way around that for single family too. So if those of you that have clients or looking at properties that are single family too, it doesn't have that kitchenette or that second sink, we can get it permitted for you. If it does have plumbing though, you have to get it permitted. If it only has electricity and it's under 200 square feet, then you don't have to get that permitted. So there's ways around things, and we help our clients a lot because they always come back to us and we're there to build those long-term relationships. So let me continue on with single family 3. You can have a duplex if the lot size is at least 7,000 square feet. That's a normal rule. Most of you, it's a commonly known rule, I should say. Some of you may know that, but it's how people are able to do those AD units and condo regime that property. Okay.
Question, just real quick.
Yeah,
So a duplex is zoned single family though, right?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, I wanted to speak a little bit about ADUs or accessory dwelling units because that's going to become more common, especially with property taxes going up so much. People need a way to make more money. So the zones to look for that most common is the single family 2 and single family 3, although not limited to those two. Lot size again needs to at least be the 5750 square feet as a minimum, but there are exceptions. Potential limits: size of the primary house, utilities, creek or floodplain on the property. Is it a corner lot? There are additional setbacks for corner lots, and large trees. So we've got some case studies on that I'm going to explain later, and we'll go through and look at, size of the lot, what the experience was, why they could not put an ADU on the property or why they could, why build one, return on investment, to get a better return on your client's investment by turning the ADU into a short-term or a long-term rental space.
Yes. Quite
I'm
often.
sure. Yeah.
I think I get it a ton, but I think people are really surprised at how much it costs to put an ADU on a property. But just build costs.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways for sure, but if they're wanting just a normal stick frame, it can be very costly because a lot of builders don't want to take on that small project. They'd rather go for the larger remodel or the new construction because, cost of materials are just so high right now. But we do have a few hacks, if you will. We have some different builders that do containers or not even a container, but pods. So there's other ways around that can be less expensive, but you're right. If you're wanting like a stick frame home, it's going to be expensive. So getting that return on investment makes it more complicated. Okay, so let's talk about multifamily zones for a minute. Properties that fall into the multifamily zone are typically closer to commercial and industrial zones and act as a kind of buffer. They are meant as a higher density and residential use. You can see here, everything that's the tan and the lighter tan color and the purple, those are all, well, it's more this tan color, that's multifamily. I'm gonna switch my screen for a second. Give me just a minute to switch here. I think I may share my desktop. Okay, maybe not because that's not working. Hang on. Let me go back to my internet screen. Okay, there, that's why.
Did something change on the settings or something?
Well, I'm switching to a map.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Sorry. Sometimes it's hard to go back and forth, but okay. So I just wanted to just show you this screen and show you the differences. You see all the single family here in the yellow, and then I'm going to zoom in a little bit and you can see the multifamily in between. That is this tanner color here. And then you've got spots that are called the missing middle, which we'll talk about an example of that. But basically it's the properties that are in between like the CS uses and the single family. And so focus showing, I could do a whole segment on, I have before, on the missing middle, but those opportunities, especially if you have an owner that's selling, can go for more money because you're looking at multifamily or commercial, even if it's zoned single family. You see how multifamily 3 here is going out on infield here, and we have clients actually on Summit View and Woodlawn, but you see these little areas where you've got pockets of multifamily going in between single family 3. And those are the areas you really want to look for to provide more density for your client. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to switch back. Okay, is everyone seeing my presentation again? I hope you guys see it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So let me continue on with multifamily. Okay, let's see. In Austin, there are 6 multifamily zones, each with different densities and lot coverage allowances. So I'm not going to go into each one, but if you have questions about it, we can talk about it. And they vary based on acreage and the amount that you're allowed to use. Multifamily zones are interesting because they sometimes have special compatibility. So if you've got a lot that's close to single family 3 or right next to it, then you've got compatibility standards that come into play. Similar to single family zones, multifamily zoning also shows up in other cities around Austin. Many nearby cities have the number of units / per acre allowed by a zone in the actual name. Such as multifamily 10 zone in Pflugerville. Questions?
I don't know what a compatibility standard is.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. Compatibility standards are there to protect the single family home, so that residential homeowner who is really close to a multifamily property. So if someone has purchased a multifamily zone property and they're right next to a single family 3 zone or just any residential zone, then the compatibility standards say, if you need to at least have 50 feet of screening or space in between where the building starts. If you do that, then they will allow you to go up a certain amount of stories. And depending on how far out you go, I think there's a 75-foot width as well. They will allow you to go up additional stories. So 3 stories, 4 stories, depending on the zone. If it's multifamily 4 or 5, obviously you can go up higher in height and number of floors versus single family, which is 2 stories typically. Does that make sense? It's kind of complicated, but it's something to consider, especially if the client's looking to do high density in a multifamily zone, whether it be condos or just a small apartment. It can really cut into their cost and number of units. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And we explain that more when we do our summaries, but that gives you a high level anyway. So let's talk about commercial and industrial zones. Properties that fall into commercial or industrial zones are typically the most dense around the city and in the city center. The various commercial zones allow different levels of activity based on proximity to the residential properties. In Austin, there are 13 commercial zones, each with allowed uses and lot coverage allowances related to the allowed activity level. And you've got multiple different zones here, and they all allow for different uses. We do rezones all the time, and in rezones, the city, say we're asking for GR community commercial because we know that that tenant or that owner of that property is trying to get very specific uses. The city can always come back and say, well, we'll allow LR, which gives the use that you want, but not GR. And so it's negotiating with the city is what we do a lot. So let me read this last section. All cities have commercial and industrial zones that they have to carefully plan for future expansion, such that there is a balance of residential and non-residential uses. Looking at the future land use map for a city can show how the city intends to expand in certain areas. And for those of you who work more north, whether it be Pflugerville, Georgetown, or all the way down to San Marcos, that's a really good avenue for you to look at, especially if the client is just looking for investment properties, but you can look through that future land use and see what they would like to see. Some of the smaller cities like San Marcos want that future land use amended if they're rezoning it to a zone that's different than what they intend for that zone to be. Just depends on the situation. I don't take rezones on unless I know that it's a 100% chance we're going to get that approved for you, just because, you know, that's a waste of time for the client. So if you ever have questions about rezones or variances, let me know. We're happy to just answer your questions, but they can be tricky. We've been doing them in Austin. My first one was off of Berkman Drive many years ago. So we've been doing them for a while. We know the staff, they're great people. But anyway, so things to look for in new properties. Zoning is very important, and depending on your zone will depend on what you can do as far as the uses go. And even if it is the right zone, for instance, let's say your client is looking for a space for their business, and they're an AC company or something. They have to have a very specific zone for that use to fall under, because every zone has a long list of uses. If the city of Austin doesn't have the right use recorded for that property, then we have to submit an application to change the use. And that's done through multiple departments. So it can be confusing, but we help a lot of business owners with that as well, even if it's just a tenant finish out. So stuff to look for. Floodplain. There is the Atlas 14 code, which was adopted, I believe it's 2019. If you're in the 25-year floodplain, you cannot do anything to that property. You cannot add on, you cannot build, you can redo or remodel the house that's already existing in the same footprint. There's the 100-year floodplain and the 500-year floodplain. Now, in Austin, they have a separate floodplain restrictions that are they're way more conservative than FEMA, even for FEMA. And so we've got a couple, and I'm going to speak about one of the case studies today, but we've got a couple clients that they're getting their elevation certificates for the floodplain, and we're going to try and change the restrictions and the level that they're at. One is a 25-year, I think they're both 25-year actually, but it's a good way to look at that, because especially if the neighboring properties have floodplain and they were able to reduce their what level that they fall under, whether it be 100 or 25-year, but it is possible. We do that, and that's something that you wouldn't go through FEMA for. We go through the city of Austin for that specifically, if it's in the city of Austin proper. Another thing to really look for, especially in single family too, or maybe some of the larger pieces of property that you're looking for clients, is deed restrictions. Anytime we do consultations, we ask for those deed restrictions. They're very important. They can really decide if you're able to subdivide properly the way you want to subdivide the lot. They can decide how many units you have on the property, even if you're in a neighborhood. Or they can also decide if you have a secondary unit, even if it's an ADU or something of that nature. So it's important to look through those. Size of the lot, you really
I have a quick question about deed restrictions really quick.
Yeah,
are you guys able to get that, or does the client have to provide that to you?
If they're online, if they're through public records, then we can find them. Sometimes they're really old and we're not able to, but we do look for them. So it just depends on the situation. So we'll go to the appraisal district, get all the deed numbers and document numbers. If they're older than, sometimes it doesn't have to be old. If they're older than like 1980, usually we can't find them because they're not online properly. And we'd have to go through the realtor for that, just depending on the situation.
Great. I've just started saving those on all of my buyer clients, because I'm finding they're harder to get once down the road when they want to do something. So great. Thank you.
I have a quick question about deed restrictions too. A lot of them that I see that are older, like I just had one that was from the 50s or 60s, and they're so like, they talk about servants' quarters and like so old, like way back. And at the end of the day, the way that I read them anyway is most of them are like as long as your neighbors say it's okay, you can do anything. And that's really hard to go into as a buyer. What do you do when you see things like that?
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good question, because there's a lot of neighborhoods in the Austin area that before the city was incorporated and they were actually a part of the city, these neighborhoods were already built out. They already had these deed restrictions. So we've seen in several cases, there are ways out of deed restrictions, but they should be listed on the actual deed restriction document. It can say something like, if you get written permission from over half of the section in the plat, so that, small area, usually it's sometimes 12 lots or 24 lots, just the surrounding the actual property, then you can, add on to the house or do what you will at the ADU. Other deed restrictions don't allow for any exceptions. They'll say, only allow for one residential unit, but then it doesn't disallow for subdivision. So a way out of that property, and this is an example of a consultation we did last week for a client in England. They were looking to buy about 5 acres so that her and several other of their friends and young kids could all move and build homes on the same lot, similar to what Lauren was saying. What we found on the deed restrictions is they can subdivide out and have 5 separate lots, and each lot they could only build 1 residential home. So sometimes there's a creative way around it. Sometimes there's not. It's just case by case basis, and every piece of property is completely different, has its own history. So I would need to look probably further into it, but that's what we've seen. So you can look for that. Okay, let's see. The width of the lot size, most common is 50 feet. Does your client want the A/B unit? You definitely want to look for at least 7,000 square feet or higher. We've seen it to where sometimes it's one large home and they've cut it into multiple units. Sometimes permitted, sometimes not, but sometimes it's legal, sometimes it's not, but things to look for. Subdivide or condo regime. Condo regime and sometimes can be the best option, other times it's not. If it's a single family lot and we determined that you could do a second unit on that property, it may be to your advantage to condo regime it versus subdivide. We've also had clients come to us and wanted to completely do away with the condo regime. They were tired of the HOA and the fees and all of the things that you have to set up when you set up a condo regime, but it's case by case basis. Water and wastewater line capacity, something that we have access to in the city of Austin. It took me 3 years to get access, but we have our own login now. So we're able to look up water and wastewater permits, which can be super helpful, especially if your client is trying to add on just to the home itself, and say they've got a couple bathrooms already, it's an older home, and say it's 800 square feet, they found the lot they want, the location they want, but they really need to add another 800 or 700 square feet, they want to add a bathroom. We need to make sure that they have enough capacity, and depending on that, if they have a 5/8 inch line for water, then they've got enough capacity, because that will feed up to 3 bathrooms. If they have if they have 3 bathrooms and they're looking to build an ADU in the back, they may need to upgrade their tap plan. There are ways around not paying the $26,000 fee for the tap plan application, depending on when the plat date is. So keep that in mind, because that will save your client money. But I wanted to throw that out there. Does anyone have any questions before I go into case studies? Okay, awesome. We'll get started. You feel free to ask questions about the case studies if I go too fast or if I'm not explaining something correctly for you. Okay, so 4914 Avenue H in the city of Austin. This is a picture of the front of the home. Here's the situation, then I'm going to pull up the map and show you what we're looking at. Alchemy Builder reached out to me because they have been in review with the city of Austin for months without any movement. They needed help navigating the comments from the planning department. Land status determination was also required. The property, there was an old pergola on the side of the house and an old deck and framing that was partially demolished. So the client purchased, Alchemy Builders was the client. They purchased this property without realizing that there was a lot of unpermitted work done. They literally added 600 square feet to the home. And we'll look at that. So let me switch my screen for a second. Okay. So here is the home. And we're going to look at the history of the home to see if we can see the details here, because in 2009, it looked different from an aerial perspective. And this is what the city of Austin does. They will go back on every single property. They're required to find out, has anything been built on, added on to this house without permits, because they want those records. They want to make sure it's done safely, securely before they approve something else for the property. Okay. So this is what the property looked like in 2009. You can see that it's, okay, so let me see here. 2009, 15, and 19. Okay, those are the differences. So that's what we're going to look for here. So this is 2009. Okay. And you can see, oh, there's too many trees there. Let me go to 2015. Okay. You see in 2015, they added on in the back quite a bit, and that's what the city found. And then let's go to 2019. They added more. Okay. And then they added more. It's hard to see, but they added more on the side as well. So when we got involved, Alchemy Builders, they basically had this shell of a home, and a lot of the sheetrock was still off, and we had to go in, get them connected with a draftsman so that they could then do as-built drawings and complete all of the work needing to be done so that we could submit for permitting. And we do retroactive permitting and help through that process. It can be complicated. This one we got approved fairly easily, but something to keep in mind when you're looking for properties for your client. And there were expired permits on here as well that we had to get closed out. And depending on the type of expired permit will depend on if it's an easy withdraw, as you see here from the 2020, so that we could then resubmit properly for the client and have the complete package. And you see everything was approved, but later on here accepted and approved. But it takes some time, especially with retroactive permitting, because the city has to understand that you're not the bad guy, that you didn't do the work, but that liability still passes on from owner to owner, unfortunately. Okay, I'm going to stay on this screen so that we can go to the next.
Quick question about that, or
Yeah, sure.
on this one. So what is the, like, first, what was the timeline? Like, how long? So they did demo, right? You said the sheetrock was off. What was the timeline from, oh my gosh, we got a problem, to, okay, we're resolved and we have our permits now?
Yeah, so it took about 3 to 4 months, honestly. And the main reason is because we were waiting on those drawings, and we had to give time for the drawings to go through. And then permitting usually takes a month to get through once you've submitted, but usually it's about 1.5 to 2 months, because it's the city of Austin. We automatically include this in our fees, but there's going to be one resubmittal. Sometimes they can email us and say, hey, can you just fix this one thing really quick and we'll approve it. We've had that happen. Or, there's a couple different things that need to be addressed and then resubmitted. So typically 1.5 to 2 months is our track record on those. Okay.
I'll just make a quick point on that too. Not all properties require this, but if you do run into a property and you're a buyer's agent and it's got, for example, an ADU, pull up the City of Austin permitting history to make sure that everything's closed out, because it can be a can of worms if it's not. I've run into that before too.
Yeah, expired permits or just open permits itself. They can cause difficulty. Sometimes they want you to reopen it or activate it again, those permits, so that they can finalize and get those last couple inspections done for the client, for the owner, and then they'll close them out. Sometimes they'll just close them out for us because they're really old. It just depends on the situation, but yes, go log into ABC. So this is the website, abc.austintexas.gov. And then you can look for if they have any expired permits. So if you go to public search, then you can just look up the street, and you want to change the date on here because you want to look for anything. I always put 1980, sometimes 1990, depends on what I'm looking for, but I like to see everything. But then also, if you're using this property profile website, it will give you a list of the permits you see on the side here, what permits there are, if there are any that are open. One was withdrawn, one was accepted. These are accepted, approved, and active. They building permit final. So this is a tree. I'm not really sure why that's active, but yeah, things to look for sure for your client, because if it's too much work, if the remodel or unpermitted work is too much, it's going to be more complicated. And I say too much, and let me explain what that means. It really means if you have a property that is a remodel and they've done electrical, plumbing, HVAC, everything, that's going to be a little bit more complicated because you're going to have all those different inspectors come and review the property, versus if it's just adding a deck or a screened in porch or something like that. That's more simple. Okay.
And this only becomes a problem if you want to pull another permit, right? Like I would never get just notified by the City of Austin, hey, we realized that you have some unpermitted work, correct?
Correct, yes. If you have, so the client wants to ever do anything to their property, even if it's a pool or a fence or a deck or whatever, they would be dinged immediately, and they would have to take care of those expired permits first, or unpermitted work first before they could go any further. So that's why it's good to know in advance, because then you're not, that your client's not calling you later going, why can't I do this? They have all the information. So I wanted to.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. Casey, that's what happened to me. I represented the seller. My seller didn't disclose that there were unpermitted work and some open permits. And then down the line, the buyers went to go add on to the house and ran into a whole bunch of roadblocks because of the open permits. More expenses, more time, more energy to get them cleaned up. And so they were threatening to sue the seller down the road.
Yeah, and I had that issue as well with a listing, and it came up during before we closed on the property. So they came back and dinged us pretty hard and got some concessions from it.
That's good.
Like, oh, it's from like 3 years ago. I'm like, oh, thanks for.
No, that's a good point, Philip, because we help realtors a lot with that. Like if they come to us and they want us to check everything, we'll check through everything. And then they want us to provide, sometimes proposals, just letting them know what it will take to get those closed out for the client. And we'll provide that to the realtor so that he can then negotiate in turn, so that if a potential buyer wants to take care of that or wants our help with that, we can help. If they want to put that on the seller to do, they can also do that. But it gives them a chance to negotiate pricing. So that's really smart.
And will you be able to go out, like do a visual on it? Because they had poured a slab in the backyard. It was like off West Mary, and it was way over 45%. And so they're like, well, we need concessions for what it's going to cost to remove all that concrete to get us legal. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can help with that. It's just giving you some basic information to help you through. Of course, we're not gonna give you a quote on breaking up the foundation, but we do look at impervious cover, and I'll show you an example of a quick report. That way you can see everything that we look at after the case studies. But that's a good point. That's a really good point. So this property, 606 East 19th Street, is in Georgetown. It's right outside. I'm gonna pull up the map. Oh, I have it pulled up. Here it is. Okay. It's in the single family area in Georgetown, but it's this property right here. And we're actually working on 608 right now as well with a different client. But Longhorn, let me go back to my screen. Longhorn Construction was the client on this one. Reached out to us about a permit. They were denied their initial application. They needed help with design and the rest of the process. They needed to get an architect involved. We do work with several different architects depending on pay scale, depends on who we would refer you to. But the house was built in 1968. It had a lot of damage to it. It was completely stripped down to the studs. They had basically almost, besides demolishing it, replaced literally everything. Electrical, plumbing, piers, HVAC. So everything, all the trades were involved. Everything needed to be redone. The plans need to be, the drawings needed to be very specific and clear. So Longhorn hired KLP, Keepers Land Planning Permitting, to get through the design and permitting process. We got through that process. The client was happy. And the good thing about this property is it was just outside the historic district. Let's see if I can show you. The purple is historic. It's very close. It's not far. So it's good to know where all of the, let's see, where is historic? They were very close, but far enough away where we didn't have to go through historic. And historic can be difficult. Has anyone had to deal with the historic district in Georgetown? They have specific paint colors. It's pretty unique, but the city of Georgetown, they're great to work with. I really like them a lot. We were there last night at the Board of Adjustments meeting, so good people there. Okay, I do want to talk about Thames. This is a pretty unique property, 5802 Thames. We're working with them now, but they came back to me after being gone after just kind of putting everything on hold for several years. And this property is in the floodplain. Let me pull up that as well. I'll show you the difference between the city of Austin's fully developed floodplain and FEMA. So this is the fully developed floodplain in Austin. You can see that they're in the 100 year. But all of their neighbors, they were able to get their floodplain reduced. And then, so let me switch here to, okay, and you see FEMA's is different. They're still 100 year for this property, but 5804, the neighboring property, they were all allowed to reduce their floodplain after getting an elevation certificate. Now this, so let me go back. This property, the owners reached out to us because they want to add more living space to their growing family, but their property is some unique environmental issues. They needed help with their permitting process. So the creek runs directly behind the property, means that there is floodplain and erosion hazard zone. Has anyone dealt with the erosion hazard zone before? Well, that's amazing, because there's a lot of properties in Austin that have this. And so let me show you what that looks like from a map perspective. What that basically means is that there is a creek running behind this property. And the creek, the reason for the erosion hazard zone is they want to see that a civil engineer does a report and study showing that throughout the years, the creek is not going to erode so much to create detriment to the home or the homeowner for safety purposes. So it's a report that we refer out to do, but it's important, especially if you're building inside the erosion hazard zone buffer. So things to look for, especially in Austin, if you have, if there is a backyard, if there's a creek that butts up to that backyard, you may want to just call us and find out if it meets those requirements. So let's see what else. So not only is there erosion hazard zone, but there are floodplain issues. So once we go through and if we're able to get the elevation changed, then we'll know exactly how much they can build onto their property or how much they cannot build onto their property and where. There are some impervious coverage I want to show you on the property already. And it's there. Okay, so this is still showing the covered patio. They did take that off, but all of that is, there's a slab there, so it's still considered impervious cover. So they'll be allowed to build there and add on there. But we also have to prove that from a civil engineering perspective that this creek in the erosion hazards report will not affect or erode, the soil won't erode and damage the home or the property. So it's pretty complicated. We're just starting to work with them, but it's possible, and we work on properties like this all the time. So, but you want to get the right professionals involved if something like that does occur, because it can get cumbersome and the floodplain department doesn't necessarily answer all the time. So here's another example that we've seen, 1200 Pasadena Drive. It is a corner lot and there are massive pecan trees in the front and backyard. The situation, the existing owner wanted to build an office in the backyard, but wanted to make sure they could do so with the City of Austin permitting process. So the realtor reached out to us, who is also a homeowner. This is their property, the realtor, and wanted to complete a land planning consult. So we did the consult. We let her know we had to do some more digging and research from the City of Austin. Because of the corner lot, there were large setbacks, which she knew about, but the large pecan trees. Let's see if we can show you guys those. And when I mean large pecan trees, I mean, I could not put my arms around the trunks of these pecan trees. They were so large. It's probably going to be hard to see here. Let me just go to Google and see if we can see them.
So pecan trees are protected because they're so big, is that why?
Yes, and heritage trees are specific trees. It's usually an oak, pecan, and Kristen, what are the others? There's live oak, pecan trees. There's 5 main.
I thought heritage trees just had to do with the diameter of the trunk, not the height of the tree. That's wrong.
No, so yeah, that's a common misconception. So there's protected trees, which have to do with the diameter of the trunk. So if the trunk is 20 inches or greater, then it's protected regardless of the species. If it's a heritage tree, if it's a specific type of a tree, then it's protected regardless. So they let you know, City of Austin loves their trees. All right, you can't see, we can't see. Let's see, let me go to the street here. These tree trunks were massive. You can see one there. There's 3 going into one tree trunk, but you still have to count that as one. And so this situation, we didn't end up working with the client, but I think it's important to have this case example for you, because sometimes you just can't do what the client can't necessarily do what they're trying to do. They ended up putting a shed that they used as an office under the 200 square feet. So there's ways around it, and we gave them that advice. But it ended up successful for them, which is what our goal is. And that's what we really love to do, is make sure that their goal, however it happens, actually they can meet that goal for themselves. But it's important because we worked with her on other properties later. for clients, and because people know we're going to be honest and direct. This is people's livelihood. This is their land. This is a huge investment for them. And so if they're going to have a hard time, or if this is going to be an uphill battle, we'll let them know that up front and let them know how to get to XYZ for themselves. But
I was just saying, when you say shed, so under 200 square feet, so they went, a slab has been poured and electric and all that stuff. I mean, so
yes.
if they wanted an additional shed just for actual storage, it could be on skids or something like that. Correct? You could put that on the property.
Yes. Yeah, we help them find a way around. Yeah. So this is another example. A realtor with Realty Austin owns this property. It's a rental property for him already. 2214 Maxwell Drive. And this is Austin, not Leander. So that's a typo. Apologies there. But okay, this is this property. Now, the client has owned this property for many years, but this back unit here is a mess. It's basically a tear down, but what we do in these cases is we're working with him to get this particular shed remodeled as an ADU for him, so that he could rent that space out as well. So we see this a lot, and we just met with the client, did a consultation with him to help him understand, is it possible that we're able to do this, and how can we do this? And this is about 600 square feet. Let me go back to my slides. I'm sorry, I skipped over my information. Okay, so let me just read this to you. The existing owner wanted a second unit in the backyard, but wanted to make sure we could get through the city of Austin permitting without any issues. So the realtor reached out, completed a consultation, and that's the first step typically, because I really want to see the current, just existing, what's there on the property. Are there trees that will stand in our way? Is there erosion hazard zone that we need to be aware of? Is it in the capital corridor? Which means, you're limited in height, even if you're a residential lot. So there's several things that we look at, but for this property, it was pretty straightforward. It is under the 7,000 square feet, so it doesn't meet the that requirement, but we were still allowed to redevelop that for him using the gray areas we know about in the code. Okay, so 1215 Newton Street. This property I really like because, let me just find it really quick. So a client reached out to us. Let me see if I have that right. 1215. Reached out to us and said that it had been a rental property for many years, and they wanted to see about potentially marketing it as multifamily because it was so close to Congress. Zoom out and show you. You see, this is Congress. I want to really show you the zoning on this because this is what I like to call the missing middle, and I'm sure you guys have heard that term before. But it can really help your client get a lot more money when selling a piece of property. So you see how this is completely abuts to CS, which is the highest commercial zone you can have in Austin. So this is what I like to call the missing middle. This should be higher density. So we did a summary that she was able to put on MLS, and they were able to get more units on the property. Okay, so let me read this. The existing owner wanted to sell the home, but wanted to find out how the highest and best use of the property was. And a lot of people are doing this right now. I'm hearing a lot of investors that own 50, 60, 100 properties. They're trying to offload some of those because of property taxes, and they're not getting the return they used to. And they're selling, and they're trying to figure out, how can we market this best? So the realtor reached out to us. We did the consultation for them. Now, what we found out, near commercial multifamily, it was a large lot. You see this, 14,635. Rezone, we could rezone the property. The new land development code did allow for RM1, which is a higher density level, no floodplain. And it ended up amazing for the realtor and the client. They did sell the property for much more than they anticipated. And this was even about 6 months ago. So before the craze, all the boom happened. So it's exciting when we're able to do that, because their client could then say, look, you can have 5, 6 doors on the property, not just one. So it makes a massive difference for the client in return on investment. Okay, so I like this because we put this in our report sometimes, gives you kind of a comparison between single family 3, which it is currently zoned, and what RM1 means. So multifamily base standard of 6 units. Let me make this bigger. Okay, it says 6 units. The minimum number of units is 2. So 6 units versus 2 units, huge difference in selling that property. For the client, which makes you guys look like rock stars. Lot width 45 feet, area 5,000 square feet, and then the floor to area ratio, which is much higher than normally is for single family 3. Single family 3, you're really, if you're in the McMansion ordinance, do you guys know what the McMansion ordinance is? Let me tell you. So it's technically called the residential design standard, and we list that in our report. If you are in that, so this is example report, we'll go over in a second. Number 8 there, residential design standard, that's subchapter F. But when you're in that, you're locked in your floor to area ratio. Floor to area ratio means if you are building up stories, like a couple stories, you still are locked in your building impervious cover. So it typically is 45% or 40%, whatever zone you're in. For this particular zone, for the new development code, for floor to area ratio, if you went up 4 or 5 stories, you're locked at 80%, or yeah, 80%, unless you did the affordable housing bonus. Your minimum lot, the minimum setbacks in the new code have gotten a lot better. 10 feet, 5 feet per side, and then side street 10 feet still. So the front setback, 10 feet, a typical front setback would be 25 feet for a residential property. So huge difference there. Okay. Questions about any of that? It's a lot of information.
What's RM1 stand for?
Say that again.
What does RM1 stand for?
Good question. Let me go back. That's the new code. Kristen, do you remember what it stands for?
No, sorry.
Okay, I've just never seen it before. I'm just wondering what it was.
Look that up and put it in the chat if you don't mind, Kristen, while we're talking. Okay, so this is an example of our quick reports. It's very thorough, but again, I don't do long feasibility studies because I don't see the need to do that for people when most of the information can be found right here. And architects order these as well because they don't necessarily have a lot of time to go into each of their properties, especially if they are very, very busy. They'll order this from us. This was done in April of 2021. And you see their full purpose jurisdiction, zoning. A lot of times, you know, it will have a neighborhood planning district a part of that. That's important to know, especially if you're trying to do a rezone. Then you've got your building coverage, which in Austin for single family 3 is 40%. Total impervious coverage 45%, which covers everything from, you know, any flat work that was done. If there's a deck in the back, all of that does count as their 45%. And then we also do potential remaining, what is remaining, what can you build to, right? For the building and the impervious cover. That way the client knows, look, I have, you know, 4,000 square foot home. I want to add 2,000 square feet. You can do that. Or I want to add an ADU. You could do that for this property. We put all of the setbacks on there. For this particular property, a land status determination, we put the rule in there as well, but this one has a Austin Heights, and so it's recorded, and you can see there down below. So you've got square feet of the lot size. So this is a very large lot. The structure was built, one was relocated and then remodeled in 1996. So that's interesting. Square foot of the existing structure, plus whatever. We usually we do separate those because you want to know exactly what you're looking at and labeling that as far as first floor, second floor, garage and whatnot. This is platted, so it doesn't have to go through any additional processes in Austin for redevelopment. No floodplain, no Edwards Aquifer. Edwards Aquifer does come into play sometimes, especially on larger properties. When you get more into like Village of Valente or Lakeway area. The watershed is also important if you're in the Edwards Aquifer. It can limit your impervious cover. We also look for erosion hazard zone and the Capital Corridor view, which I referenced earlier. This one is not, but the Capital Corridor view is literally the view of the Capitol. So if you're in the view of the Capitol, you are limited in the height, which is unique, but can also really damper the project if the client's wanting to go up a couple stories. We do label easements because sometimes you'll have properties that have unique easements that are in the back, so people can't build in the backyard, that we do vacate for them. Depending on the easement will depend on if it can be vacated or not. What neighborhood plan is the property located in? Residential design standards. And if it's in those residential design standards, then you are locked in a couple things, especially in East Austin. It's more common in East Austin. I know several of you work in East Austin. Is an accessory dwelling unit possible? For this property, one existed, so that's great. Sometimes you can have ADU reduced parking in some locations in Austin. So if that's possible, you have that in there because that, if you need reduced if you are trying to build an ADU in the backyard, they do require additional parking. So it's good to have that in there. Open permits, expired permits, and scope of projects. So this is what we provide to the clients. The first page is going to be the left-hand side, and we give our property summary and recommendations there, directly answering questions, specific questions the clients have on that property. Any questions about the reports?
How much does that cost usually?
$100.
And how long does it take to get one?
So the quick reports are a 24-hour turnaround because I know how competitive the market is right now. So if these are just for residential though. Now we provide these reports for consultations as well. We usually will meet with the client and translate all this information and help them understand all the information. That's what the consultations are for. Also, if redevelopment is happening, we like to see everything in person, the current surrounding area and the current situation of what's going on in the property. But for clients that or for realtors that understand, maybe like Lauren, who understand more about the code and just want a snapshot of the property for the client, this is what we give them.
And do you just look at it like from an aerial view, or do you go out and look at the property?
So in consultations, we do meet with clients on the property and we'll go over everything with the client there. But yeah, if we're just doing a quick report and a quick turnaround, we're just going to look at it from an aerial and from a mapping perspective. But consultations are $250 because you're paying for our time to come out, explain everything to the client, translate all this information. We do have helpful things on our website that you can download. It gives definitions of every single thing on here. And something we don't have on here is our water permits, but we do also label the water permits, what size they are existing on the property, which is helpful to know if you're adding more bathrooms. Essentially.
Right. Yeah, I guess my question is, I have that one property, it's got several big trees on it. You'll be able to see those and determine those from the aerial view, hopefully.
Not really. When we're looking at trees, I really like to go in person because I need to see them, measure them. I can tell if it's a heritage tree or not. And then we can talk about critical root zones. We can measure that out. Because you've got your main canopy where your root zones are, and then you've got your half and your quarter. And the quarter is going to be 1/4, which is going to be the critical root zone where you cannot build into specifically. So for situations like that, I like to go in person just because it's more beneficial to the client to see that to really look at the trees.
Okay, so that would be a consultation, and that's $250.
Yes, which you still get the summary, you know,
Sure.
of course, but then we meet in person and we're able to work through this. A side note, if we're working on ADUs, if you refer a client and they want an ADU and we end up doing the permitting through that process, you know, we do give referral fees for that. Just want to throw that out there because I do love working with clients and ADUs. It's a unique project for sure. But wanted to provide a benefit for you guys for allowing me to be here today and speak and train. But exclusive for Bramlett residential. Is this code down here? Now that's for consultations, but if you were to schedule a consultation for the flat fee online, you could put that promo code in there and it'll give you $50 off. So $250 normally, but looking to really build long-term relationships with you guys. You can go to our website and schedule that for the client and use that code. And the client can use that code too. A lot of times, you know, the client will be given that code and that's perfectly fine. We do also do commercial consultations as well. Those are 500 because there's a lot more that goes into those, a lot more research and questions that we need to get answered for the client. But yeah, I want to be here to answer questions or look up property for you guys. Any questions for me specifically or in general? Hope this was helpful.
This was so incredibly helpful for me. So I have that listing that's coming. And so I would think that like next steps for me will be to do an introduction with you and my client and let you guys take it from there. I'm sure, Lauren, you're going to provide all the contact information, right?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Rika. This is amazing. And I'll probably have a bunch of questions too. We think the pricing for all of this, thank you for the discount and being a preferred relationship. That's amazing. This is really helpful for, especially in our market, having somebody to give some advice quickly.
Yeah, and I love that. And, you know, you don't want to put this liability on yourself as a realtor. You want to have an expert. You want to, you know, present yourself as the expert, but also knowing to connect right people and being that you can call on the right expert at the right time to give that documentation. So thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I have a quick question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
Just on a particular situation of a friend of mine. He actually has a house up near the dam on Lake Travis. And several years ago, he ended up building, I think it just got completed this past year, but he ended up building a 2-car garage with, I believe, a 400 or 500 square foot kind of living space above it. And I don't think he got permits for anything.
Okay.
So I know that he wants to sell it. I honestly, between, you know, us here on this call, I think the reason why he did that is he wanted to keep the square footage down for tax purposes. And now it's kind of coming back and biting him in the ass because we talked about potentially listing and selling his home. And, you know, we had a conversation about, well, what he would need to do as far as going back and getting the permits, even though he's already done it. I know he's kind of in a pickle there. The other option, I guess we were talking about, is he doesn't want to do that. He does at least have to disclose it. And it's, I guess, up to the buyer on if they're wanting to, you know, take on that liability or not. But with how things are right now, I don't think he got any permitting for the electrical. You know, there's a full bathroom up there. I don't think he got any permit for the plumbing. I don't know what he did as far as the survey and the permanent structure on the property. But how, I mean, what would he need to do to go about getting that stuff done? And is that going to really come back and bite him?
It really could. We have a client that, I'll just share this quick story because it's similar. I was at the Board of Adjustments last night in Georgetown for a client that in the seller's disclosure, the previous owner lied and said, yes, everything's been permitted properly. Well, there's a 12-foot fence and her property neighbor is an apartment complex. So it's actually a big deal. She doesn't want to see people in her backyard waving at her, you know, from the apartment. So she had to go through a variance. She's going to turn around and then have to, unfortunately, take legal action against against the seller because of the situation. So it can actually mean a lot. And as you know, there's so many people coming from California and other parts of different states that they're very much used to making sure everything is done legally and permitted properly. I would recommend doing a consultation first. That way I can dig into the history of what actually was permitted, what hasn't been permitted, and then recommend, give him some recommendations. I think if he's working on it while the property is for sale, then that makes him look better, and it will also help the buyers have more trust in the process and in the property itself. But that liability does transfer from owner to owner, so you definitely have to be careful with that. Yeah.
I have a quick question too. I do a lot in suburbia, master plan communities with HOAs. That's probably, I don't know, 80% of my business. But what typical things do you run into in those type neighborhoods that we should kind of have on our radar?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because HOAs do determine quite a bit. You want to make sure that whatever the HOA rules are, the client is following. So if they want to do a remodel, or if they want to add a patio, a lot of times you have to apply to the board to get that done first, or along with the permitting process. And so we can get involved and help with that. Sometimes I have to do that with rezones, which is a separate subject, but yeah, you want to look at the deed restrictions. You want to make sure that the HOA, whatever those rules are. I know my HOA, I added a patio, and someone called me in because of just adding adding on to the patio. I wasn't doing anything vertical, but still had to go through the process of the HOA and applying and making sure that they were okay with what we were doing. But remodels are going to be a little bit more complicated for HOAs. It just depends on what the rules are. A lot of times they want to see what you're doing. They want to see how that house is getting changed. So hopefully that's helpful.
That's super, super helpful, and would be, I mean, is that part of like the $100 consultation that you would do, deed restrictions / HOA rules and regulations?
That would be more of the actual consultation versus the
okay.
report, just because I'm going to be translating more of code and documentation for the client, and also explaining it, right?
That seems invaluable to me on both the buy side and the sell side, to let people know what they can and can't do, especially in those master plan communities.
Yeah.
Because if, for a few $100, if I can have a written document that kind of explains it in more detail, as opposed to me just saying, hey, go look at your HOA covenants. It's going to be, that's a huge time saver.
Yeah. And then they're confused, and then they're asking you a million questions, which that's not your expertise. Although you probably know what you're reading, but it's not your expertise. So yeah. Perfect. Any other questions? Yeah, absolutely, Ashley.
And what was the code again for consultation? Just Bramlett or Bramlett?
Just Bramlett in all caps. Yeah.
All caps.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about a cost. You mentioned $26,000 having to do with water or sewer lines. Could you explain what that is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So say the client is building a second structure in the backyard, they're able to do that. And say their existing home has 3 bathrooms on it, and we log in to Austin Water, we find out that their water line is only 5/8 of an inch. Well, they don't have enough capacity to add that additional bathroom. So what they would have to do is either upgrade their tap plan or apply for a new tap plan. And the new tap plan, if it's new construction and it's new, the land has never been platted and it's just been platted recently, the city of Austin goes on that plat date. And so that's a common misconception for developers. A lot of times is they think that it's just the $26,000 for the new tap plan that they're applying for, and that's water and wastewater. If the property has been platted in like the 60s or 70s, or it just depends on what time frame, but though they have reduced costs. So they will go on that date and they will allow you to use that date. So it can save the client for that time frame, 60s, 1960s and 70s. The application fee is like $2,000-$3,000. So we're talking about saving the client $23,000 off the bat. Huge deal. Huge deal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it sounds like whenever we're unsure about anything, we should just reach out to you right away.
Yeah, we get a lot of questions, but I'm building relationships here. So feel free to call us. Kristen's always available if I'm not available to answer questions for you guys, or send us a quick email. You can send us an email through the website, or you can just send us an email through, so my name, Ricka, RICCA @keeperslandplanning.com, or Kristen is her name, Kristen @keeperslandplanning.com. And she put that in the chat for you guys, so you can just copy that.
I can shoot out an email later today with our recorded class as well, along with all your contact information and our promo code.
Perfect.
Lauren, will you also add to the preferred vendors too?
Absolutely.
Thank you for that, Casey.
And we have about 5 more minutes. So does anybody have like another specific situation? We might be able to get through like one more. Sounds like no?
Yeah.
Oh.
Actually, I do have something. I have a client that wants to, they already own their property and they want to put a tiny home on wheels on their property. And I know that that's not allowed, or at least the wheels aren't allowed, right?
Yeah.
I've had other like random investor friends do something similar, but take the wheels off, maybe affix it to the ground via pier and beam foundation, or not, like just cinders.
Okay.
I guess I'm curious. I'm not super clear on, because it sounds like, yes, you can do that. However, you need to take certain steps to follow the rules. So maybe you could, I don't know, clarify.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeremy. So yes, tiny homes are allowed. Every property is different, so you have to look at that property. But yes, we do recommend like putting them on pier and beam, since wheels are not allowed. But then it depends on what they're doing. If they're adding a bathroom, do they have enough capacity for that bathroom? Are they wanting a kitchenette or not? How large is the property? So there's things that there's a lot of variables that we have to determine first. And then, we also, and I want to communicate this to you guys, we have a wealth of connections in this community. So not only do we have a really good reputation in Austin, like we're known in Austin to be very honest, upfront, and have integrity. So that's why we have such a good relationship with planners. But then we have a long list of civil engineers, architects that we use, draftsmen that we use, builders that we work with regularly and trust, and even tiny home companies as well. So, once the client does start working with us, we open that up to the client and give them, that list so that they can feel comfortable with that. And I take people off that list if they're not meeting those requirements from my end, because I am a perfectionist and I'm very careful about my reputation with the community, because we are the largest permitting company in Austin. We have 6 people. There's no one like us in Austin. It's usually like the one person who just runs things to the city, and they, have these few connections. Waterloo has too, and I like Roy and them. They're good people, but just depends on the situation. So I would say send me the address, Jeremy. We can take a quick gander at it. Maybe order a quick report, or possibly a consultation. For plans like that, I like to visit with them on the property, because then we can determine where the easements are, where the tiny home should go, what their water capacity is. So there's a lot to it. So I kind of answered your question by giving you a lot more questions, but
No, that's okay. I mean, I had already planned on, having them reach out to you guys for a consultation. It'd probably be best for you to just get your eyes on the property and walk through every scenario. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I didn't think we were gonna go the whole amount of time, but we did, Lauren.
I know you've got a lot of great information. We really, really appreciate your, willingness to speak with us. And guys, I will get this uploaded later today and probably get an email out this evening once it gets up to the cloud. So, all righty, everybody, definitely reach out to Rika when you need her.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rika. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rika.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.